Welcome to the Real Estate Way to Wealth and Freedom podcast with Jacob Ayers, providing actionable content to help you along your journey to financial freedom through real estate investing. As the premier asset class, real estate has helped ordinary people just like you amass fortunes. The benefits of passive income from real estate investing will allow you to live a life you want. And now your host, entrepreneur, real estate investor, and apartment deal syndicator, Jacob Ayers.
Hi, and welcome to the Real Estate Way to Wealth and Freedom podcast, episode 111. I'm your host, Jacob Ayers. Today, our guest is Chris Prefontaine. Chris has been in real estate for over 25 years. His experience includes the construction of over 100 single-family and duplex homes. Chris has been a big advocate of constant education and participates regularly in high-end mastermind groups consulting with private mentors. Chris runs his own buying and selling business with his family team, which buys 2 to 5 properties monthly, so they're in the trenches every single week. They also help clients do the same thing around the country. Chris and his family have done over $80 million in real estate transactions. They mentor, coach, consult, and actually partner with students around the country to do exactly what they do. Today, we're going to dive into the exact processes and procedures that Chris teaches his students and show you how you too can implement these strategies in your market. Without further ado, let's jump into the episode. All right, today our welcome on the show, our guest, Chris Prefontaine. Chris, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, happy to be on.
Hey, Chris. Well, thanks so much. Hey, can you start by telling the audience a little bit about yourself, how you got started investing in real estate, and just take us through your journey?
Sure. I'll date myself a bit here, but I go back to the early 90s in real estate. I did some single family home building. We called them spot building at the time. We didn't get involved in subdivisions or anything like that. When we decided to get involved in subdivisions is when we lost our shirt, building roads and things like that in the mid-90s. I then bought a Realty Executives franchise, so I became a broker owner. I despised brokers and realtors when I was a builder, but I became one. It was an easy way to hustle, and I had gotten beat up a little bit, so it was a good way to get back on my feet. Ultimately had a great experience there, sold that to Coldwell Banker in 2000, I think it was. Basically, that meant that they sucked up my team and my market share, and I operated in their office quietly for a year or two. I actually went off and started coaching at that time people throughout the United States and Canada. And then, of course, that brought us into the kind of the run-up of the 2000s. We were doing a bunch of condo conversions. We would take big buildings, 3 units, 6 units and up, and we would convert those to condominiums. That all led up to the lovely 2008 debacle. When the debacle happened, for me, it was February of 2008. For people that got hit different times, but I remember like it was yesterday. I had several commercial deals on the books, made the mistake of already counting that money and it wasn't in yet, and then had a bunch of these condo conversions that basically the market dropped by 2/3. So that was not a happy time. I write a whole chapter in my book about that debacle, so I'm open to discussing that. But it taught me so many things, and it brought us to where we are today. It made us re-engineer totally the business of buying and selling real estate. That being not getting on any personal loans anymore, not using our own cash, not putting our credit up with personal signatures, none of that. And so 2008 taught me that the hard way. And so we now run a business that buys and sells 2 to 4 homes a month, just with myself, my wife, my daughter, Kayla, my son, Nick, and my son-in-law, Zach. They buy and sell in the trenches. They run most of that now. We then, with the coaching, with Smart Real Estate Coach, we do the same with what we call associates around the country and do deals with them. So we're teaching, mentoring, and doing deals with them in the trenches, all of different states. So we revenue share with them. We get on the phone with sellers and buyers with them. We're simultaneously coaching them to do the exact same thing we do. So that's kind of a 10,000 foot view. And I can go back to any of that, but that's a rough idea of how we got here.
Yeah, awesome, Chris. Well, it sounds like you've had lots of unique experiences that have shaped your real estate investing journey, dating back to the 90s, doing all kinds of stuff from new development, new construction to, all kinds of different stuff in between. So it's led you to, develop a lot of unique experiences. And now you're kind of coaching others and helping others build businesses and kind of expand on the experience you've kind of built over the years. So touch on that and tell us what that coaching kind of looks like. And one question I've got for you is, who is coaching for? Is it for everyone? Is it for people just getting started, very experienced people just in the middle? Can you talk on that subject a little bit?
Yeah, great direction. So a couple things. I'm a little bit unconventional. We are as a family in how we teach and train. I saw, and I still see, an enormous gap in what I call a gap in the education area of real estate. That being people buying courses, people going to boot camps, doing all this stuff, but not actually doing deals. So there's a big gap for implementation, for execution. I always liken it to I was in Hawaii. This was early 2000s. I made the mistake of trying to learn how to surf, and they put you on the beach on a surfboard, and they teach you on the beach. You're on the beach. You're just trying to learn techniques from them, and then they put you in the water. So that's the execution. Too many people stay on the beach in real estate, and I don't know what it is. I think it's they're excited. They go to the seminars, they get the courses, and then there's just nothing there. So we've kind of bridged that gap in a big way. I don't go around the country doing preview events to sell people into boot camps, and I don't sell a bunch of product. What we do is very simple, and this answers your question of who we coach. We have a 1-hour free webinar, and it lets people get their feet wet. Like, am I going to like this method? Am I going to like buying stuff on terms like Chris talks about? Okay. If they do, they then do a home study video program. Again, no getting on a plane, none of that garbage, but it's loaded with about 90 different things to do and about 60 plus videos. It's action packed. After that, every single person's got to go through that if they're going to do deals with us and be coached and mentored, because that's kind of like the language, if you will. It's everything we know, do, access, operate. And then they can apply to what we call an associate level. And that's where we actually coach and dive in and do deals with them. So who can do that process I just explained? Really anyone, Jacob. I have people that are engineers and trying to get out of that corporate world. I have a nurse trying to get out of that corporate world. I have a full-time 72-year-old gentleman just really kicking butt, doing it full-time. So experience, no experience, burnt out before like I was, or beat up, I should say. And then it's every walk of life. People say to me, give me your avatar. Like, who's the client? I say everyone. I've got 33 years old to 73 years old right now in our program. So it's tough to say it's for this person, but I will say 10,000 foot view is anyone out there looking to transition to real estate without putting up any loan, signing on loans and using cash, or you've been frustrated, you're out there trying to learn stuff, but you didn't do a deal yet. And that just boggles my mind. So that's where we come in. Long answer to your good question.
Yeah, well, really good analogy you brought up there, Chris, and that's that surfing analogy. Too many people are staying on the beach trying to learn to surf. I've kind of coined this term, and I've called it the learn-do ratio. So you've got to spend at least some amount of time learning real estate. You can't just jump into it without any knowledge. But there's also a fine line between spending all of your time learning and never actually doing anything. Like you mentioned, people going to seminars, boot camps, reading, listening to podcasts, studying, doing all these things, but never actually taking action. So it sounds like your students and the way you teach people are to find this balance between actually learning and then doing and implementing. So yeah, really good balance there. And it's kind of a hard thing to grasp sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, you said learn, do. I love that. I would actually add one word. So learn, do, and then improve, right? So it's like a cycle. So you learn it, and then you go do it, and then, okay, make some tweaks. So you're improving nonstop. I think it's super important. If you go to a seminar now, I've been to them, you've been to them, you might see, or a RIA, you might see 2, 3, 4, 5 people in the entire room doing deals, which is kind of sad. If you come to our yearly event, you'll see 60, 70% of the people doing deals actively. And what the heck are we doing? We're out there to do deals, right? So it's very simple. Go after it and execute.
Well, with that one little term, Chris, you've already improved my acronym. So now it's changed to the learn, do, improve. So perfect example of how you're helping people improve. So Awesome stuff. Well, Chris, let's kind of dive into some of the fundamentals you teach your students. And I know one of these ways you advocate to buy properties, as you've already kind of mentioned it, but buying on terms. Can you kind of walk us through what that means?
Yeah, it's funny, we're at a mastermind here and I was talking to people who own other businesses and I said, real estate's interesting. You have all these niches within niches within niches. Well, we buy 3 different ways and that's it. We stay absolutely laser focused. We buy lease purchase, we buy owner financing, or we buy subject to. And it's kind of in that order, by the way. A lot of deals are sandwich leases, then another smaller batch is owner financing, and then a much, much smaller batch is subject to. Those are the only ways we buy. And then we only exit with a rent to own.
Okay. Well, can you walk us through each of those 3 different ways, just high level, what they mean?
Sure. So I'll pretend you're my seller on a lease purchase. And let me preface these 3 ways with this, Jacob. Many people think that because we're buying on terms, they can't fathom a seller doing that. So they always say, well, okay, so they must be desperate or they must be hurt. And the answer is unequivocally no. It's not just people in trouble. Now they could be, but it's also people that might be debt free. So let me explain each one. Lease purchase, usually there's underlying debt. And if you're my seller, I'm going to pay your monthly. I'm going to put the property into agreement for an agreed upon term and price. I'm going to make your monthly mortgage payment. And then on or before a date, typically let's use 36 months. I'm going to pay off your loan. So I benefited from all the principal pay down. And I'm going to give you a set amount of cash, or there may be no cash in it for you. Example, your house, you were trying to get 200 grand, you owe 150. At the time I start, I say, okay, Jacob, I owe you $50,000 at the end of this term and the payoff of your note. So you know it's going to be small, but I'm benefiting from that. You're getting 50 grand at the end of this. So that's if someone has some cash in there. If it's a lease purchase and there's no cash, what's my price? Just pay off of the loan at the end. They just want debt relief. Those are mainly the scenarios we see with lease purchase. Are there some people that call and they're just a month or 2 behind and maybe it might take a small investment? Sure, but that's not what we focus on. We find them on accident. The next is my favorite by far, and it's the owner financing. As you know, there's a lot of different ways to talk about owner financing. When we say owner financing, we mean a seller that's debt-free, actually. No mortgages, no liens in the property. They want full price. We're willing to give them full price, sometimes even a premium, which will boggle the minds of some listeners probably, if we can make monthly principal payments against that total price until a balloon payment is due, and that usually is 48 months. So example, Pennsylvania just did a big estate property with one of our associates, one of our students. He and I did it. The guy was trying to get 500 grand for his property. I'm using round numbers. He wanted to head off to Texas, where you are, to be with his 5 kids for Thanksgiving. This was last Thanksgiving. And so the realtor couldn't get it done. He wanted to leave. And so his attorney and his accountant suggested he do owner financing. When we laid out the option, we make $1,540 monthly principal payments for 4 years. At the end of that 4 years, we give him a balloon. It's such a hedge against the market downturn, huge principal reduction benefit. So that's when we say owner financing, what we mean. And then subject to, that is usually when someone's desperate because, frankly, they're throwing their arms up saying, I'm out of here, I can't do it anymore, or I need debt relief, or my house is upside down, I just got to leave. And they'll go ahead and do a regular closing with us, regular being they'll deed the property to us, and we'll take it over, leaving the loan in their name and make payments on it until whenever we want to cash out. There's no end date on that, on those subject to deals. So those are the 3 ways. And again, I can go back to any one of them, but I hope that helped.
Yeah. So on these buying on terms, Chris, what are you looking for in terms of properties and sellers? Are there any kind of qualities that you tend to see work better? I know we mentioned one for the seller financing, you're looking for debt-free properties, but let's kind of touch base on the sellers and what would motivate a seller to sell on terms like these.
Well, so a couple of motivating factors for sellers. Really, the answer to the first part of your question is I want to talk with anyone that is looking for a solution that they can't find, right? That's a general answer. So they've got to move quick, or they had a job transfer, or they had a divorce, or they had something changed, a life event happened where they have to do something. And those are great. It's a family or a seller that is trying to maximize their property. They don't, quote unquote, need to sell, but they want to get all the money and they're willing to wait for it. So If the only time this doesn't work, this might be easier, is, and I say this to sellers, is if they need or want the cash today, if they have any cash in it. I'm not their buyer. I tell them, I'm not your buyer then. You want full price and you want it today, I'm not your buyer. If you want full price or full market value, I can probably get you there if you can wait for the equity. And so that's the ideal seller. Did that answer that? Is that where you were going?
Yeah, that's good. Well, how are you finding these motivated sellers?
We have a bunch of ways. I actually did a little, I call it a marketing report. It's not even a book. It's called Get Deals Now. And it goes into every piece of lead generation. But I'll tell you what, like 95% of our lead generation is. It is a virtual assistant that who calls FSBOs. And in this market, most pockets that we're dealing with around the country are hot. So that the FSBOs take a little time, and a lot of them are selling. The next in line, and right now it's probably harder than the FSBOs, is that we have an in-house system which automates the calling of expired listings. And for those non-realtor people, that's just listings that are wrong with the realtor and they couldn't sell for whatever reason. It could be price, functionality, whatever. Those are a big source of leads right now because as hot as any market is, stuff's not selling with the realtor, whatever the reason is. So those are hot. We also call on rentals now in this hot market. Those are simple calls, very simple calls. Someone's renting a property, you're just wondering if they're looking to sell it. And a lot of times you've got a burnt out landlord. Now, we can call us in-house. I used to, when I started doing terms deals, I used to just dial myself. But now with my kids on board, we've actually got virtual assistants dialing. We've got what we call an expired dialing process, which automates calling hundreds of these so that only the cream of the crop calls you and you're not dealing with non-motivated sellers. That's the crux of our lead generation.
Yeah, okay. And just real quick to touch on something you mentioned, FSBO. That's FSBO, or for sale by owner, for those not familiar with that acronym.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries. So yeah, well, awesome. So you're looking for motivated sellers through for sale by owners. You're helping build systems with virtual assistants, which I think is something really cool. And I'd like to dig on that in a minute. But going back to these buying on terms. So you're looking for the right property and the right type of seller. So we've kind of talked about the sellers. Now let's talk about the properties. Are there any types of properties in terms of single families, multifamilies that you're targeting with this kind of strategy?
Yeah, single family, 3 bedrooms or more. We learned the 2 bedrooms, they still sell. They're just tougher to sell. So single family, 3 bedrooms or more. It's funny, a quick story. So my first sandwich deal ever was a 2 bedroom. I didn't know that 2 bedrooms are tough. So fast forward here, I don't know how many years it's been, 5.5, 6. That sandwich lease turned into a subject to, one of my favorite strategies, converting that after they know you, love you, trust you. So I still own it. The house is probably worth $250. The loan's probably down to $100. And that was my first sandwich deal, and it's a 2 bedroom. So it's not that you can't do them. It's just that we look for 3 bedroom and up singles.
Yeah, okay. So now that we're talking about sandwich deals, we've talked about how you're entering into these properties, buying on terms, and then you're exiting by placing a tenant on a rent-to-own basis. Is that correct? Is that what the sandwich is?
Yeah, absolutely. So the bread is the buyer and the seller. Excuse me. And the meat in the middle is us. The buyers, the only buyers we'll put in these homes, Jacob, I think this is very important for listeners. There's a lot of talk on the internet about people that do, without bringing up any particular educators, that do sandwich leases, and they could care less, and they'll tell you publicly, they could care less if their buyer ever gets financing. I got a moral and ethical challenge with that. So what we do with our model is, if I'm putting you, and you're a buyer, if I'm putting you in the home, you're going through pre-screening with my credit enhancement company. You're going through pre-screening with our mortgage broker who only does lease purchase and has for 19 years. You're going to have a game plan that says to us, hey, Jacob's going to be mortgage ready in 12, 18, 24 months, whatever it is. And then here's his game plan. Here's his path to closing and owning. And after that, then we can accept you. And of course, with a strong down payment. So this ensures that we have success, unless they have a life event, stuff happens. It also ensures that we're dealing with buyers versus renters. And that's a huge issue, because a glorified renter is someone that wants to have an option and they put no money down, and well, you got a renter. You might as well just go rent property. So it's dramatically different.
Well, yeah, I think that's something worth touching in and digging in here, Chris. And that is when you're turning around and putting a buyer into this property, you at that point are acting like a lender. And it's important to you to not be acting like a predatory lender and putting somebody in here that you know well that is not going to be able to execute and actually buy this property. So what you're doing is helping them make sure that they have the tools and the resources and ultimately the capability to really buy this property. It's in both your interest and their interest for you to do so. So yeah, really good stuff. And I think that's an important quality in how you're teaching to do this strategy.
Absolutely. I think that there's, if people can Google and go on YouTube and they can look up the rent to own and they'll see that, again, some people just don't care about that. I think it's super important. Some people say, well, look, if Jacob's my buyer and he puts down $50,000, he's serious. He's going to close it. And to that, I said, no, you're asking for more trouble then. Just make sure they're qualified before you stick them in there.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Chris, let's go back and touch on some of those other things you were doing early on in your career. I want to touch on some of those condo conversions. And what was the term you used for turning a single story property into a multiple story property? What's that term?
Those are raise the roof projects, and
raise the roof, yes.
Yeah, I can't take a ton of credit. My wife Kim loves interior design and space design, and back in I think it was like 2003, 4, and 5, we found a neighborhood. And this is a good strategy for folks. We don't do this now. It doesn't fit our model and our values right now, but this is a great strategy. You find an up and coming neighborhood that's got a bunch of single story ranches, and that's what we did. And we lived right down the street, so we knew it was up and coming, and we bought them. And then we took out a construction loan. So again, that violates what I do now, but we took out a construction loan, signed personally, took the roof off, and then built a colonial basically out of a ranch and then resold it. We did, a small handful of those. She was actually featured in the Boston Globe for doing that and had some great success with it.
Yeah, really cool. Yeah, well, I just wanted to touch base on that really quick and kind of get those backgrounds. Mostly identify that term. So that is raise the roof, and maybe that's self-coined or maybe it's just one I've never heard of, but yeah, it kind of piqued my curiosity because I live here in Houston, Texas, and you see a lot of those kind of things happening, but more so it's more of a complete tear down and then raise the roof. So you'll see these older ranch style homes, they'll come in, maybe tear them completely down and then build 3-4 story townhomes. So yeah, something a little bit similar, but yeah, really cool stuff there. Well, Chris, switching gears here, going back to the coaching, and we kind of talked about who is right for coaching. Now, as a potential student, what should a potential student be looking for in a coach like yourself?
Okay, I've got as you can tell, most of my opinions are strong, but I've got a strong opinion on this one too. I think it's not even an option to have a coach or a mentor in any industry. So forget real estate for a second. That isn't doing what you want to do, right? They're in the trenches. They didn't do it 20 years ago. They're doing it today because things change. And when you're talking about real estate, I'm talking about weekly things change. So weekly we learn things. Weekly we bring it to our mastermind students, and weekly, it's constant. So that's number one. Number two, clearly they've had success with it, right? It's like me hiring you as a financial planner, never asking you what you do personally or for your tax returns, which is insane for me to hire you if I don't do that. So same with real estate. Why would you hire someone that didn't do deals and is not currently doing deals? The other piece of that is personal. Everyone doesn't like or can't work with my personality. I'm very logical. If A, then B. If B, then C. Go do this, and then we'll have this result. Some people don't like that blunt coaching. That's just how we are as a family team, not just me, all of us. So I would say that the connect with them personally, you gotta relate, you gotta get along, and then make sure that they're having success still today doing it in the trenches.
Yeah, I think that's a really important quality, and you are out there practicing what you're preaching, Chris. You said that you and your family and your team, your family is your team. You guys are buying and selling 2 to 4 homes a month. So you guys are out there doing these same principles that you teach your coaching students. That's right?
Yeah, absolutely. We do 2 to 4 now because people laugh, but we were so aggressive for 4 or 5 years that our portfolio of literally waiting to be cashed out is in the several millions, probably to the tune of 15 or 20 million. So we've keyed it down to 2 or 4. There were months where we did 10 homes in a month, and it's just not where we need or want to be right now. The kids can maintain a very cool thing just by doing 2 to 4 a month now.
Yeah. Well, Chris, I can see some of the strategies you're teaching are really good for people getting started out because it provides low entry points sometimes when you're buying properties on terms, you're not coming up with 20% down like you are with traditional financing. And I know this from experience. That's how I got started, is with traditional bank financing. And no matter what, no matter how much money you have or experience you have, you are eventually going to hit a ceiling to how much property you can buy. There are always more deals out there than you personally have money. So then there comes a time when you got to start getting creative with your financing, either partnering with people, doing syndications, buying on terms. I mean, like we mentioned earlier in their show, there are so many ways to buy real estate and so many niches upon niches upon niches, but you've really found a few ways that help people buy properties pretty easily. So I think that's important too.
Yeah, my days, and maybe some of the listeners will relate to this and some won't, my days of worrying at night or worrying whenever about the market going down, about being on something personally, about having investors being disappointed, those days are gone. It's just not my makeup. I don't want to deal with that. I want to have fun and I want to have stress-free. And all those things you described going the other direction are going to create stress at some point in your life. It's not maybe, it will happen. So I just stay away from it.
Yeah. Well, Chris, one thing I want to ask about buying on terms is a lot of these terms you were explaining have a balloon payment at the end. So how are you coping and how are you dealing with that? Because that's just delaying a larger payment, maybe 48 months, like you mentioned, down the road. So what's your strategy to paying that off?
Yeah, really cool. I forgot to say that's a good question. So let's go back to that scenario where I said we pre-qualify the buyers. So if I have a 48-month term, who am I looking for? What makeup, what mortgage ready plan am I looking for with my buyer? I'm looking for someone that's going to come back to me from the screener and say, you got 48 months, Chris. This buyer's going to be ready in 18 to 24. So now I know I got a huge buffer in there. I know I don't have to push hard. I have it fitting within my term. Now, does it happen where they cash out earlier on time? Of course, that's the plan. However, does it happen where I had one recently, I'll give you some very specifics, where life happens to someone, despite your plan and their plan and the two intents, that life happens and they got to leave. Yes, we had a home recently. We just closed last Friday, so I'll share this. We had a 3-year term with the seller. It's probably a seller that would have given me an extension if I needed it, but I don't want to disappoint. And so we were at the 2-year point, and we said to the buyer, we checked in with the buyers, are you on track? And we had realized at that point they're off track. That's why we were checking early. Come to find out, one became disabled, and it really put a strain on things. So they said, we got to leave. They were actually as upset as we were. We got to leave. Here's the keys. So what do? This is not a bad thing. There's ways to pivot on all deals. What we did was, in this case, we had a year left. Could we have found a tenant buyer that was a really strong one in the 9 to 12 month cash out period? Yeah, but that was kind of getting pushy and greedy. So what we did instead is we literally just called the local realtor. In this case, it was my nephew in a different state. And we said, Mike, put this home on the market. Coincidentally, the home had gone up in like 60 grand since what we had it under agreement for. So that was a good thing. And he got a full price offer in a matter of days. Now, that doesn't happen all the time, but we had such a buffer to play with. We had a whole year. And so when we're stuck, we just resell it to a tenant buyer, or we sell it outright. You always have that option. Sell it outright and make sure you can pay off things on time or early.
Yeah, okay. So ideally, you're putting that balloon payment at the end of the term on the buyer, if at all possible, and checking in, making sure that they're going to be able to, proceed with those terms. And in the case that you're not, you've kind of got a contingency plan to just sell it outright.
Yeah, we've never had to come out of pocket, knock on wood, because all of these are going to be the proper plan. And look, real estate, life happens, this. So real estate's always negotiable too, right? So you can always call the seller and work on dates or change payouts and all kinds of neat things.
Yeah. And would the contingency to that contingency be giving the property back to the original seller?
A great question. Our agreements in the sandwich lease call for us to be able to do that, and I've had to do 2 in about 5.5, 6 years. Just 2.
Yeah. Okay.
Owner financing, of course not. You own it. A little bit tighter.
Yeah. Well, when you're talking about self-screening these buyers, are you doing that in-house? Are you doing that with your own team? Are you outsourcing that? What does that process look like for you guys? Actually,
a combination. So one piece of this might surprise you. So we pre-screen them with a credit enhancement company, and they'll tell us kind of the front end and back end housing ratios, the debt to income ratios, they'll look at that from a kind of a 10,000 foot view and give me a summary that is important to put in the file that says when they'll be mortgage ready. If we think they're touchy or if our term is tighter than the norm, we will add to that the gentleman I mentioned that does more of just the mortgage side of things, just to get another set of eyes on it in a really strict game plan. And then third is this. So they pass those 2 smell tests. They come into our office for a buyer's meeting, and I don't care if they're 2 hours away. They're coming to our office. We need to meet them face to face. And then, believe it or not, we want to make sure they meet in person, at least 2 or 3 of us out of the 5 of us, because it's a gut feel too, right? This is kind of like a relationship that you've got to be in for 1 to 3 years or whatever it's going to be. And so there's 3 stages, and that last one is our acceptance of them when they come in.
Yeah, okay. Well, Chris, I've got a unique little scenario here I'd like to run by you, and this is something I haven't told you about yet, but I'd like to run a little coaching scenario by you from a personal experience from myself. How does that sound?
I'm open, you know that.
Okay. Well, hey, I've actually done a lease option myself, and I've told the listeners about this in previous episodes, but this was the very first property I ever bought. It was a single family home. And I'd rented it out a couple times. It didn't go so hot. I had some, bad tenants in there because I was, not being a great landlord. This is my first deal. I was a little bit new to all this process. So I decided I was going to try out a lease option. And it was a 2-year lease with the option to buy it at the end of the 2-year term. Well, the lease went great, but it actually didn't go through buying. The tenant wasn't able to purchase the property. So with knowing those few vague details, is there anything I could have done better as the seller or potentially your student in this scenario?
Well, a few things pop out right away as red flags. One is the 24-month term you got, just super tight term. Then the second is your lease that you put in there. Can I assume they did not put a big down payment down?
It was $3,000. So yeah, I would say not very large.
Okay, so when someone says to me, I want to put down, how much do you have to put down? I have 3,000. Well, I'm sorry, this is not personal, but you're really describing a renter putting down maybe first month in security. You're not describing a buyer, and we stay away from renters. That's how I deal with that. So it doesn't surprise me at all that they didn't buy, because really you had a glorified renter.
Yeah, okay. Well, essentially what you're saying by that, Chris, is this tenant didn't have enough skin in the game.
They didn't have enough skin, and I'm assuming, maybe you did, but I'm assuming that whole pre-qual process that I brought up didn't get taken care of either.
Does not sound like to the extent in which you coach and recommend. So
yeah, so those are the red flags anyway. And so, some of that, Jacob, is for the listeners to know, say the 24-month thing. That's all script, frankly. People say to me, a coaching email comes in. Hey, Chris, I'm just in your QLS course, and I talked to a seller and they said they want 20 grand down. Well, no kidding. Every seller does, but you got to have the right scripts. You got to know how to deal with that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So just with those few little scenarios or those few little facts about my scenario, you're able to look at that and identify some points where I could have improved, things I didn't quite do as well. So really shows the value in your coaching and your experience in this space, Chris.
Yeah, 100%. When you get used to looking at hundreds of what I call property information sheets, you can pull that stuff out, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, definitely so. Well, Chris, let's kind of switch gears here, kind of talk about you personally, and I want to kind of understand how you've built your team. I know you've got a pretty unique team in your family, but can you kind of talk about the importance of your team and how they contribute to your success?
Sure. So what's a little unique about what we do, even though most of it's family, we have, when I go over this group, this team, Jacob, understand that if it was just buying and selling, it can be done, and we've discussed this, it can be done in 2.5, 3.5 days to only do two homes a month, 3 homes a month. But we're also running coaching. So the staff is the family that I mentioned in the beginning, and then a support staff, Lauren, and then a bookkeeper. So how it works is this. We all are on incentive, and that means that we get paid when a deal closes. That's it. We have a percentage that goes to each member, and as deals close, that's how we do it. That way it's scalable. There's no overhead stress when things slow down, and we outsource a lot. And I'm just thinking through my answer and how I talk to new people as well, and that is you will strategically add a person as needed. We usually know, pinpoint when you need it, And we've done so coincidentally with family, but you can do that with outsiders as well, keeping things all incentive driven, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love it. Well, hey, Chris, what kind of processes, systems, procedures do you guys have in place, and do you coach on finding leads, cold calling sellers, and the kind of the lead generation and the finding deals thing? Could you talk about what kind of systems you guys see that work best?
Yeah. So let's pretend you're brand new and you joined our associate program. You've already been through the home study course, and you say, all right, it's call one. What do I do? Call one is really, here's where you go get your leads. It's on our website, but here's where you go get your leads. Go sign up for that. It's like $50 a month. You're not talking about big dollars here. 40 to 60 bucks. Okay, so now you have all the leads, but do you really want to sit there and dial those, especially when you're brand new? No. So then next step, here's the 3 different virtual assistants that we use. And if they're an associate, they get our personal assistant that I've had trained for 5.5 years. But either way, all 3 resources are great. So then we set up the virtual assistant. So now that virtual assistant's going to dial those leads that you set up on the lead generation platform. Now all it's a matter of is what? The property information sheets are going to come in from the virtual assistant. You're going to know, well, okay, wow, I got a lead here. Now what the heck do I do to call them? Well, we're going to call some of those with you. And you're going to call them. We're going to call them together, and we're going to have fun doing that. And if you're in a state that is single party consent, we're going to have you take calls, and we're going to help you critique them. And then we're going to call yourselves, and we're going to tape our calls, again, if we can in that state, and we're going to send it to you. So you learn on hyper speed when you're doing it live like that in the trenches. So there's no time wasted. I'm talking about call 1 and 2. All that gets set up on how to do that.
Well, what I'm getting out of this process, Chris, is it's actionable, very, very specific, actionable content. So step 1, go get leads. And what you mean by that, I think, let me know if I'm wrong, is kind of identify your market, your target, demographics, target properties, target areas, kind of setting these criteria of what you're wanting. Is that correct?
That is correct. And what makes it easy, though, Jacob, is we basically teach people to do the same exact thing with the same exact people, for services and vendors that we do. That's it. We don't try to recreate anything in any different market. If they want to delve and play, they can outside of that box, so to speak. But we just tell them to do what we do. So it's all repeat.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so step 2, outsource those follow-ups on the leads to virtual assistants. And what this does is it frees up your time to do other better use things with your time. So you're hiring somebody who understands how to do this 1 or 2 or very few simple step process very well and better than you can, quite frankly. And then step 3, take that information from the virtual assistants and follow up personally, and then start, calling the leads that you think are going to generate something. And yeah, so that's pretty much it, right?
Yeah, that's it. And some people people always say, well, how quick? I get emails. How quick can I get a check? I don't know you. So it's,
yeah.
I got a police officer in Pennsylvania that did a deal in 30 days. I got the top earner in all the coaching I've done right now that took him 6 months to get started, but then he's crushing it. Why? I don't know. Everybody's different. So until I know someone, I can't really predict, but it's usually 30 to 180 days.
Yeah, Chris, you'd probably be wrong in assuming that myself, Jacob, would get the first deal in 30 days. I'm kind of one of these guys that moves a little slower, takes a long time to really make up my mind on something. But once I do, I'm fully committed and it's like full steam ahead. So yeah, you couldn't just look at me and say, yeah, Jacob, you're going to get your first deal in 30 days or, vice versa. So totally makes sense there.
Yeah, and I liken it, Jacob, to a game of tennis, right? So what do I mean by that? When someone starts, I ask for permission to be blunt and don't take it personally. That's how I do it. And they say, okay, good, I give you permission. And the second thing I tell them is, look, this is a game of tennis. I'm going to give you the stuff you need on call 1. That's me serving the ball to you. Now, how fast you serve that back is up to you. But I'm not going to act until you serve it back. I'm not going to sit there and serve and have nothing coming back. That's a one-way game. That's boring. But if I serve and then you serve it back by taking action, I'm going to go as fast or as slow as you want. Is that okay? And they usually agree to that.
Yeah, awesome. I love it. Yeah, and I think that's really important. It's kind of a conversation in this aspect where you're going to give some content, they're going to give some feedback and vice versa. And that's how, it's best learned by that person on the other end.
No question.
Yeah. Well, Chris, why are you doing all this? What are your reasons why? And, what's motivating you to help coach people and teach people the strategies you've learned over your journey?
A couple things. People, especially at my yearly event, will say, "Well, why, if you're doing deals, why the heck are you coaching?" Well, there's a couple answers in no particular order. One is until you coach, and I did it at a different level back in the early 2000s, as I mentioned. But until you coach, you don't know the high you experience. You don't know the fine tuning you personally have to grow and be involved in order to coach. You don't know how cool all that is. So I do it because I love, love, love seeing someone go from A to Z. I love being part of that, this personal satisfaction. Now, the other piece of this is once I automated the buying and selling right before my kids came in the business, and that was not predictable. It just happened. You could do this, as I said, in 2.5, 3.5 max per week days. Well, what the heck am I going to do the rest of my time? I'm 52. My kids are in their late 20s. So I said, okay, that'd be cool. As people started asking me to coach, and I said, well, that'd be cool. If I can do deals with them and revenue share around the country, wouldn't that be cool? So we're still doing deals. We're not bored, yet we're helping people at the same time. So it's kind of a win-win.
Yeah. And just one thing I should have touched base on earlier in this relationship you have with your students. You've mentioned a couple times you're doing revenue generation sharing, meaning you only succeed if your students succeed. And I think that's a really cool, unique character to your coaching program.
Well, yeah, it's a win-win. And the other piece of that is what I said earlier. I boggles my mind, as you can tell, I couldn't even get it out, when people say, yeah, I've been in real estate. They'll apply or they'll go through a program. They'll say, I followed so-and-so, and I also followed so-and-so. And I say, oh, fantastic. So how many deals did you do in blank year, 2017, 18, whatever? One or none. And I just don't understand it. So the purpose is to do deals, period.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, Chris, it's been a real fun conversation. We've got a lightning round as we're wrapping up this conversation. It's just a series of questions we ask every one of our guests. Are you up for it?
I'm always up for it. Whatever you got.
Of course you are. Okay. Well, our first question is, what was your biggest hurdle getting started investing in real estate, and what'd you do to overcome that?
My biggest hurdle when I started on the terms business was belief in me, because I had just gotten crushed in the 2008 debacle. And that came to mind. I don't think I've answered that way in the past, but I'll tell you why it's important for your listeners. Most of it's between your ears. There's systems and there's people that have done it that can teach you. Most of it's between your ears. So I had to get out of that, and it took me a little while to gain my feet again.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Chris, do you have a personal habit that contributes to your success?
Call it a daily ritual, call it whatever you want. I talk all my guests about it on my show. If I don't work out, or not all three of these, if I don't work out or meditate or do yoga in the morning, I'm messed up for a while. As you know, I'm in Arizona and I'm on a different time zone. So I was in the gym here at 2:30 West Coast time, because for me it's 5:30. It's my normal time. That's the morning rituals for me.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, Chris, do you have an online resource that you find valuable?
Online resource. I'm a low-tech guy, Jacob, but I'll tell you most recently, and I love this guy's service so much, I asked him to come to our yearly event. It's called Get Leverage. And I heard it on someone else's podcast, and it's just an awesome, awesome online platform to literally outsource anything you want that's legal. Get Leverage.
Okay, I like it. Awesome. Well, that's Get Leverage. We'll link that in the show notes if our listeners want to learn more about that service.
Great.
Now, Chris, what book would you recommend to the listeners and why?
Okay, this changes whatever stage I'm in my life, and for the listeners, I'm sure too, right? When they say, what's your favorite book?
Sure,
well,
yeah.
Most recently, I just finished on the plane right here, The Hard Things About the Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. I like it because it's not A through Z, do this, do this, do this. It's, hey, I built a couple companies, I brought them public, and it sucked, and here's why, and here's what you can do in the future. It's very hands-on.
Okay, awesome. Well, that's The Hard Thing About the Hard Things. We'll link that book in the show notes for our listeners to find if they want to pick it up. That's a new one to me, so I might do the same.
Awesome. Enjoy it.
Well, Chris, last question we have for you in the lightning round. If you were to give advice to your 20-year-old self to get started investing in real estate, what would that be?
I would go right back to the super important thing in any business, and that is find a mentor that you can relate to, that's done what you want to do, and don't let go of them until you outgrow them, and then find another.
Yeah, awesome. I love it. Well, Chris, you've given us a lot of actionable content in this short conversation, just proof of what you do in your coaching. Could you tell the audience members a little bit more about if they want to connect with you, where to find you, how to best reach out to you? And also, you have a book and a podcast. So could you tell us a little bit about those?
Sure. So I'll do those first. That's easy. The book is called, it's an Amazon bestseller. It's called Real Estate on Your Terms, kind of what you and I alluded to the whole time.
I like it. Okay.
Yeah, just put that in the search line on Amazon. You'll get it. Real Estate on Your Terms. The podcast is simply smartrealestatecoachpodcast.com. Smartrealestatecoachpodcast.com. Some cool people on there, as you do, and love to have your listeners jump on there and take a peek. As far as things they could get their fingers on, remember at the very beginning I said we have a very simple system. I don't have a lot of stuff out there. I have a very streamlined funnel, so to speak, and that is I've got a webinar. If you don't mind listening to me and my accent for another hour, I spend about 70 minutes with you on a free webinar, and I throw out as much as I can on that webinar. If you like it at the end, then I offer the home study program I alluded to. That's it. The webinar is on my website, smartrealestatecoach.com. You register for free, enjoy it, and hope to see you on there.
Awesome. Well, some of those resources you mentioned, your book is Real Estate on Your Terms. We'll link that book in the show notes for our listeners to find, pick up on Amazon, get that free 2-day shipping. And then you've got a podcast. It's called Smart Real Estate Coach Podcast. So look that up anywhere you can find podcasts, iTunes, and all the other directories, I'm sure. But for more information to connect with Chris, step one is go to smartrealestatecoach.com. Listen to that webinar if you want another 70 minutes of action-packed content from Chris. And then step two, if you want to even take more action, is to do the home, what did you call it, Chris? The home...
It's the home study video program. It's called QLS, Quantum Leap System, QLS.
All right. Well, you heard it from Chris. Chris, thanks so much for the conversation today. You've been a great guest. You've given us all kinds of great actionable content. We really look forward to learning more about you and having you back on the show in the future.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Hey, thank you so much, Chris. Take care. All right, that wraps up our episode today with our guest, Chris Prefontaine. Chris has provided us with a ton of great information, resources, and strategies that you can implement in your real estate investing business. If you have any questions about the things we discussed on today's show, feel free to reach out to me. Visit www.jacobayers.com. And if you like what you heard, please leave a rating and review on whichever platform you're listening on. Till next time, signing off, I'm your host, Jacob Ayers.
You've been listening to the Real Estate Way to Wealth and Freedom podcast, providing you actionable content to build your real estate empire. Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for personal advice. The opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have a potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of the Real Estate Way to Wealth and Freedom, LLC, exclusively.